My world has always been flat maps and precise angles. I'm Joan, 70, a retired cartographer, a map expert. My life was spent tracing boundaries, understanding terrain, and finding what was hidden in plain sight. But even my sharp eyes couldn't see the betrayal coming from my own blood. My son, Rick, was supposed to be my retirement support. Instead, he was a greedy storm cloud. He had failed at yet another business and was desperate for cash, the kind of desperation that makes a man blind to family honor. He came to my house, not for comfort, but to help me clean out the attic, claiming he needed to sell some of my useless junk. As he rummaged through dusty crates, his eyes landed on an old, heavy antique compass that had belonged to my great-grandfather, a sea captain. The brass was tarnished, the needle stuck, and the glass was cracked. To anyone else, it looked like a worthless piece of clutter. But to me, it was a sacred heirloom, a symbol of my family's ambition. I reached for it instantly. "Rick, no! You can't sell that. It was Papa's. It's a symbol of our family." Rick snatched it away, his eyes calculating the potential sale price. He laughed a cold, sharp sound that stripped away any remaining hope I had for him. "Mom, it's a broken compass. It's worthless junk. You're too sentimental. I need the money now, and you can't stop me." He dismissed my plea with a sneer, reducing my family's history to scrap metal. He didn't care about the sea captain or the legacy. He only saw dollar signs. He threw the compass into a box of assorted antiques he planned to auction off that very week. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cold weight of his betrayal sat on my chest. I remembered my grandfather, who had first taught me to read a map. He had always told me, "Joan, the compass points to what is truly valuable, but only if you know how to read the needle." That memory struck me with the force of a revelation. The compass wasn't junk. It was a cryptographic key, a puzzle left by my map-making ancestors. The needle was stuck, but its design was unique. Rick was so focused on the cash that he missed the code. I realized the compass wasn't worthless. It was the precise, unique key to a hidden fortune, a family land grant that Rick knew nothing about. My revenge would be an intellectual humiliation. I would use the very object he called junk to save my family's future and expose his greed. My mission was now clear. I had to recover the compass and find the hidden map Rick had missed. I couldn't risk buying the compass back at the auction, as that would alert Rick that the item was valuable. I had to use secrecy and speed. I called the auction house immediately, pretending to be a sentimental collector. I described the compass, using vague terms, and offered a small price for it, claiming it was a replacement for one I had lost. The auction manager, already dealing with a flood of antique jewelry, agreed readily. I recovered the antique compass, feeling a surge of satisfaction as the cold brass settled into my hands. Back in my study, I began my analysis. I wasn't looking at the terrain. I was looking at the instrument itself. I used my specialized skills in map analysis and archival research. I noticed the compass was built with a specific, minute deviation in its standard magnetic north, reading a deviation that was meaningless to a sailor today, but would have been vital to a cartographer in the 1,890 seconds. This deviation wasn't a defect, it was a clue. I then returned to the attic, armed with my new knowledge. Rick had only looked for things to sell. I was looking for things to read. I searched the hidden back corners, looking for a false wall or a strange floorboard. I spent hours tracing the old planks, feeling the wood for any sign of a seam. Finally, tucked behind a loose beam in the chimney space, I found it. A small, rolled-up cylinder of aged vellum. The paper was brittle, and the edges were yellowed with age. Inside was a map not of the seas, but of local property boundaries, drawn in my great-grandfather's distinctive hand. The land grant was huge, but the crucial point was obscured by a complex, hand-drawn symbol. The map was coded, and it was incomplete. The needle was stuck, but the map was the key. I realized the compass deviation was the specific key needed to align the magnetic directions on the map, revealing the hidden coordinates of the land. The ticking clock was now deafening. Rick had scheduled the auction of his remaining assets for the following week, hoping to clear his debts. but I knew he was planning a much bigger sale soon after. With the coded map and the stuck compass in my possession, I was ready to begin the true intellectual battle. I knew I couldn't solve this complex, archaic cipher alone. I needed an ally, someone who loved puzzles and trusted me absolutely. I called my granddaughter, Lily, a university student with a brilliant mind for logic. I brought Lily to my study. I explained the code simply. Lily, your great-great-grandfather hid a treasure map in the house. We need to fix this compass and use my knowledge of old nautical measurements to read it. Lily was fascinated and immediately agreed to help. The map's code was based on an old system of nautical measurements, specialty, but difficult to apply to modern maps. We spent days studying the map's angular lines and its unusual star alignment system. The complexity was immense. The map showed a large, undeveloped area on the outskirts of the county, hidden behind a modern subdivision. We had to prove this land belonged to us and find its exact boundaries. We meticulously cleaned the antique compass. The problem was not the needle itself, but a complex mechanism beneath the brass housing that was frozen by rust. We carefully disassembled the fragile instrument, using tweezers and fine oil, working slowly under a bright lamp. It was like performing microsurgery on a piece of history. As we worked, Lily found a tiny, almost invisible inscription etched onto the brass housing of the compass. Grandeur plot, true north. This confirmed my suspicion. The land was not a small patch. It was a massive, valuable estate. The repair was successful. The needle, once stuck, swung wildly, then settled, pointing precisely to the deviation I had observed. We now had the true north reading needed to align the map's coded symbols. The cipher was cracked. The coordinates pointed to a large, undeveloped lakefront property. The successful repair of the compass and the decryption of the map revealed the coordinates of the grandeur plot, a large, beautiful, and completely undeveloped piece of lakefront land. I immediately went online to research the property records. The shock was immediate and devastating. The land was currently listed for sale by a shell corporation named Apex Holdings. I knew that name instantly. It was a holding company Rick had used in his previous failed startups. Rick hadn't just sold my compass. He had already stolen the grandeur plot using the knowledge he gained rummaging through my attic, and was preparing to sell it to a major developer. The simple theft had ballooned into a sophisticated, multi-million-dollar fraud. I learned the closing date for the grandeur plot sale was set for 48 hours from now. The ticking clock was no longer a minor annoyance. It was a crisis. Rick was moving fast, hoping to make his biggest score before I could file a claim. I immediately called my attorney. They warned me that the legal process would take weeks. The only way to stop the sale was to establish a physical claim to the land and prove prior ownership before Rick closed the deal. I had to physically go to the remote, hidden land and find the one piece of physical evidence my great-grandfather had left the legacy stone that marked the original family claim. Lily and I gathered supplies. The land was remote, protected by thick woods and old, forgotten boundary marks. We faced a huge physical challenge. The 2 days ahead were not about legal filings. They were about survival and speed. We were racing against Rick, his lawyers, and the clock. Lily and I drove out to the remote grandeur plot, armed with the antique compass, the coded map, and a desperate plan. The land was rugged and beautiful, exactly as the map described. Rick's development crew was already clearing trees near the entrance, proof that time was running out. We couldn't risk being seen. We parked the car far away and entered the property through a hidden deer path, guided by the precise readings of the antique compass. We spent hours navigating the dense, tangled forest, using the compass to triangulate the old map's cryptic symbols. My hip ached constantly, and Lily had to help me climb over fallen logs, but the thought of stopping was impossible. We were searching for the legacy stone, a specific, unique boundary marker my great-grandfather had hidden years ago. We knew it would be a unique, carved stone that held the original, irrefutable proof of the family's claim, something Rick had been too arrogant and too fast to find. Finally, after hours of searching, Lily cried out. Half buried under thick moss and pine needles, we found it. A smooth, carved piece of granite bearing the Brooks family crest and the original founding date of the grant. The legacy stone. I carefully cleaned the moss and, using my phone, took multiple, dated, high-resolution photographs of the stone and its location. This physical marker was our claim. Just as the sun began to set, we heard the sound of Rick's SUV. He was bringing his lawyer to the site for a final inspection before the closing. We were trapped. Lily and I froze, hiding quickly behind a cluster of thick pines. We watched as Rick and his lawyer emerged, laughing and confident. They walked the perimeter, missing the subtle signs of our presence. Rick pointed toward the lake, already discussing how much profit he would make. The confrontation was imminent. I knew I couldn't run. I had to force the issue now, while we were physically on the property. I told Lily to stay hidden with the phone and keep recording. I then stepped out from behind the pines, my face showing a cold, terrible certainty. Rick stopped dead, his face draining of color. "Mom, what are you doing here? This is private property." I held up my hand. "It is private property, Rick. It's the grandeur plot, and it belongs to the Brooks Family Trust, exactly as your great-grandfather intended." Rick quickly realized his scheme was exposed. He abandoned his attempt to be kind and lunged at me, trying to grab my phone, convinced I was recording. "You old fool! You can't prove anything! Get off my land!" I held my ground. This was the moment I needed. Lily, filming from her hiding spot, captured Rick's violent outburst, his desperate confession of ownership, and his attempt to destroy the legacy stone. I quickly and calmly shouted, "Rick, I know about Apex Holdings. I know you used Thomas's savings. The land is tainted." I immediately pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, who was waiting for my signal. I directed him to file an emergency injunction to freeze the property transfer, citing fraud, prior claim, and my physical presence on the site, backed by video evidence of Rick's violence. Rick was arrested for assault and trespassing. The plot was frozen, and the land was safe for now. Rick was humiliated. He was released on bail, but the damage was irreversible. The initial buyer, the developer, immediately withdrew from the sale, seeing the violent dispute and the immediate emergency injunction filed against the title. Rick's entire multi-million-dollar score had evaporated into thin air. The shame was enormous. The news of Rick's arrest and the land dispute spread like wildfire through the community. His other investors, already nervous about his past failures, pulled their funding, seeing his reckless violence and sudden exposure. Rick's financial world collapsed completely. I did not celebrate. I used my time to meticulously prepare the legal case to permanently transfer the land into the grandchildren's trust. I knew the key evidence would be the signature evidence I had already collected. I instructed my attorney to file the old 2005 fraud documentation that showed Rick's past attempted forgery, arguing that his current financial statements were suspect due to a documented history of deceit. This wasn't about the money. It was about destroying his credibility. I was using his own past actions and his desperate attempt to look like a caring relative, the birthday signature, to expose him as a lifelong fraudster. The case was now about character, and Rick had none left. Rick fought back with venom, blaming me for everything. He claimed the legacy stone was a fake and that the whole thing was a scheme concocted by his unstable mother. My lawyer was ready. In court, we presented the trust draft from 1995, proving Thomas's original intent. We presented the video evidence of Rick's violent assault and his confession of ownership on the land. Then came the final strike. My attorney introduced the handwriting doctor, the forensic document specialist. The doctor presented the comparison between Rick's past falsified signature from the 2005 deed and his current clean signature from the birthday memory book. The specialist confirmed, without a doubt, that Rick had a documented history of intentional document fraud. The judge was stunned. Rick's credibility evaporated instantly. The judge realized Rick was not a businessman. He was a thief who had tried to steal from his own family using years of manipulation. The combined weight of the historical evidence, the video evidence, and the signature evidence was crushing. The final judgment was swift and devastating. The judge ruled against Rick completely, stating that his history of fraud and his inability to prove the legal source of the funds used to purchase the land made his claim invalid. The land and the savings account were officially transferred to the grandchildren's trust. Rick was humiliated, financially ruined, and faced further legal investigation for the assault and the old fraud. I sat in the courtroom, exhausted but whole. I felt immense satisfaction, not because Rick was punished, but because I had fulfilled Thomas's final, sacred wish. I had used my skills as a cartographer and archivist to prove my memory was sound. My mind was clear, and my love was powerful enough to undo years of calculated deceit. The family honor was reclaimed. The chaos was gone. Rick was gone, dealing with the ruin he had brought on himself. The land was safe. I drove out to the grandeur plot with Lily, my granddaughter, who had helped me navigate the woods. We stood by the lake. I pulled out the original antique compass, now perfectly repaired. I showed Lily the tiny inscription, "Grandeur Plot, True North." I explained that the true north of our family was not found in money or greed, but in honor and truth. I then pulled out the trust draft from 1995, the crucial document that had saved us. We placed the original antique compass on the trust draft and stood in silence, honoring Thomas's last wish. I realized that Rick's betrayal, forcing me to fight, was actually a strange form of gift. He forced me to prove the true value of my knowledge and secure my family's future forever. My memory, my historical skill, and my love were stronger than any greed. The legacy was safe. The antique compass had finally pointed us to the true north of our family honor.